You're listening to In the Chair, a podcast for Freemasons in England, the UK and around the world. Find out more at masonicpodcast.com. But first, welcome your host, Robert Bone.
Hello there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're having a great day whenever and wherever you're listening to this. And of course, this once again is In the Chair, a podcast for Freemasons. It's about Freemasonry and is actually also for anyone who's interested in finding out about Freemasonry, no matter where you are in the world, hoping you're going to find this of some sort of interest. And of course, we're up to episode 29 so far, which is absolutely amazing. And we've had almost about 30,000 unique downloads, which is fantastic. And that figure is going up each and every day. So many thanks for hitting the download button. If you haven't, make sure you are subscribed as well. So when the podcasts come out, I know they started off weekly. I know some of them haven't been as weekly as quite as what they were. I meant to do one last week, but I come down with such a terrible cold. I basically didn't have any voice, and I'm still showing the signs that a little bit now. So you might be able to hear that in my voice. It's a bit croaky, so apologies about that one. But make sure you are subscribed, so when new episodes come out, they will automatically get downloaded to your media player. So if you're an Apple user, an iTunes user, go on to masonicpodcast.com/iTunes. That link will redirect you through to iTunes, where you can see all the shows on there. You can download them, keep forever and ever and ever, as long as you want, to listen to as many times as you want, and also hit the subscribe button. Similarly, if you're on Stitcher or Android, you can go to masonicpodcast.com/Stitcher, and that will do a similar thing. That'll take you through to Stitcher, where you can do that. Or if you just go onto those apps directly and type in the chair, no matter how you found this, you can subscribe that way, or just through the website. If you go onto masonicpodcast.com, all the episodes are listed. For example, this one is masonicpodcast.com/29. That's where the notes are for it as well. And there's an embedded player. So on that page, you can click the play button. And I mention that because there are different levels of people of different levels of technological expertise. I know some people have got these things all wired up so that when it comes through, their thing downloads it and it starts playing automatically through their speeches as soon as it's been uploaded. So it's I know there's all these different ways you can do it. I just want to try to make it as easy for you. Actually, I do have let's say about this for next. Let's crack on with the news. Now, when I started this, I started a blog called inthechair.co.uk. Well, actually, it was in-the-chair.co.uk, and it was a written blog that I was going to be using for my time as in the chair, because I went into the chair of Kennett Lodge last September, and it was meant to be a diary for that when I was going out visiting. I then started writing a revision plan to learn the words, learn the ritual that I needed to learn as Master of the Lodge, and that's still up there. And if you're going to be going through the chair yourself, or you want to be learning the words, it's based on emulation ritual and what I needed to be doing in my lodge, but you can probably, if needs be, adapt it if needs be. And also the book about learning Masonic ritual by Rick Smith, and you can find out more about that by masonicpodcast.com/3, and that was the interview with Rick Smith where we talked about learning Masonic ritual, and I started all of that side of things. But of course, it started off as a written blog, and then I was looking for a podcast. There wasn't one out there, at least not a UK-based one. So I then started In the Chair, because that was named after the blog, but then it had its own website called masonicpodcast.com and all of those things. And of course, it was meant to be my time in the chair, with a slight pun on it, because when I'm interviewing people, they are technically in the chair as well, in that sort of Masonic connotations to it as well. So I thought that worked quite well, but it really was only going to be a year's project whilst I was in the chair. It turns out that in Kennett Lodge, I've now gone through and I've done my ceremonies for the year. Kennett Lodge really only starts in September, meets over the sort of autumn, winter and spring periods, and our last meeting is actually in March. So that means in September, what will be the next Kennett Lodge meeting, and that will be our installation, where a new master goes into the chair. At the last meeting in March is who the next master is going to be, and it was decided it would be myself again. That's the first time that's actually going to have happened in Kennet Lodge's history. It doesn't happen very often. Instead of having an installation ceremony, I believe it will be called a proclamation. I'll be proclaimed master for a second term. So I'll be doing a second year in there. So instead of... and the reason that's come about is we've got some Master Masons who are coming up through the ranks, but they're not quite ready to be going into the chair themselves yet. And although we do have some past masters, some of them have been in the chair a few times now due to having to, to fill vacancies. And some of them, it's not been that long since they were last through the chair themselves. So it was decided to keep me in the chair for a second year to basically keep that seat warm, ready for those younger Master Masons who are going through those progressive offices. So that really means I'm going to be having a second year in the chair, which really means I'm probably going to be doing a second year of that blog and, of course, continuing the podcast. So all those things I was trying to get going and fitting into 1 year as a 1 year project, or possibly even over the 6 months period, looks like I'm going to have to be continuing, which leads me on to the next bit, which was for future episodes. So if you have any ideas or any thoughts, please let me know, and also any questions. You might not be aware, but I actually do a monthly newsletter. I've only done about 3 so far. It's really just a bit of a summary of, recent things recent podcasts that have come out, ones that might be happening in the future, maybe a bit of background news, especially about the potential of, because of course it was filmed. There was that other episode where we were filmed for Sky. Don't know whether it's actually going to be going out or when it's going to be going out. I will, of course, keep everyone updated on that one. But if that starts coming off as well, then that's going to bring a lot more listeners to it. So trying to keep people up to date with this. So I set up this little newsletter. You can go on to the Masonic Podcast website, which is masonicpodcast.com. If it doesn't pop up, I think it does on the homepage. The thing popped up to say, do you want to sign up for it? Or there's a little thing on the right-hand side. You can sign up for the newsletter and you'll get details. And the reason I'm saying that is I sent a newsletter out, and it also said about questions for upcoming episodes. And it could literally be some silly little things that you're not too sure on. Maybe you're not a Freemason yourself and you want to know a little bit more information. You've heard some rumours about things and you just want some things clarified before you find out more about potentially joining. It might be that you've been a Freemason for the last 40 years and you want to know about maybe something else that maybe the younger Freemasons seem to be talking about that you don't know about, and the whole spectrum in between. And I have had some people reply back, because I sent that out as part of the newsletter, if you have any questions, and I've had quite a few responses. But if you haven't, just drop me an email. It's robert@masonicpodcast.com. So if you have any questions as well, you don't need to sign up for the newsletter for that. Drop me an email there, or through Twitter. It's Masonic Podcast on Twitter. That's a great way to get hold of me as well. And I'm just sort of trying to collate these things together, because I might try and have a bit of a Q&A episode in the future as well. So if you have any questions, now, I'm not an expert on everything myself, but that doesn't mean I can't answer that, because what I might do is, if there's a question that I don't know the answer to, I can then try to find maybe someone who does know the answer to then get them on to give the expert, the expert opinion on things. So if you have any questions, I might not be able to answer it myself, but hopefully through the power of the internet and using the podcast, we can try to get some answers to that. So hopefully that would be good. So that's the bit of the news there. So make sure you're sort of signed up to the newsletter for other information. Hopefully the documentary will be going out on Sky TV. I don't believe it's been officially commissioned by Sky yet, because it's all in pre-production, all the filming. They're going up and down the country over the coming months. But hopefully they were filming the last podcast where I was on with had James Birdseye on, and that was actually we actually recorded that at Sindlesham Masonic Centre, and they filmed there. So hopefully, and done some interviews and stuff with them beforehand. Hopefully that's going to come across well. You always know in that sort of thing, how it be used in the edit, if it is used at all. But I'll keep you updated on that one. But hopefully that's going to start tying in with all the tercentenary things. Hopefully what's going to happen is people are going to be finding out about Freemasonry, about the tercentenary, seeing this documentary on a major TV network. It's actually going to be, hopefully, going to be a 4-part series, and then looking at not just talking about the Freemasonry itself, but the people behind Freemasonry, the actual Freemasons, and the variety of people who are members of it. And of course, if that starts getting involved, and people start realising there's a guy that's out there doing a podcast for Freemasons, people are going to start listening to this, and it might be that they don't find this podcast for another 6 months. But what I want them to do is to find that in 6 months' time or a year time, and still find this content it's still going to be viable and useful for them. So I'm really expecting a big jump up in the listener numbers as well. That also makes me think that actually if you are running any sort of business, perhaps based in Freemasonry, or perhaps might have Freemasons might be quite a good client base for you, then get in contact possibly about advertising on the show, because I'm doing this, I know I've mentioned it a few times myself, I'm doing this completely out of my own pocket. I have to pay for the hosting, I have to pay for all the equipment, and of course the time is one of the most valuable commitments I have to put into putting these podcasts together. But it does give lots of exposure. As I said, I've had 30,000 downloads. Most of those are in the UK. There are some international ones. So if you're thinking about something, maybe you do run a Masonic themed business, maybe you run a venue or know a venue for doing ladies' nights, maybe you're a Toastmaster or something that provides entertainment for ladies' nights, get in contact, because of course we can do little, this is done independently, and I guess it's a bit like maybe the Freemasonry Today that goes out to the members of the United Grand Lodge of England. Although you have the little adverts in there, think of this as a radio show, and we've got ways that we can actually produce a professional sounding advert for you. So I thought I'd mention that just in case anyone's listening, because although we've got these listeners now, hopefully there's going to be a lot more listeners coming on board in the future, and they're not just going to be listening to the new episodes, they're going to be going back and listening to these older episodes as well. That's a bit of a longer than what I'd been planned to do, but there's a lot of information there. And of course, the main sort of thing is, of course, I'm going to be going through the chair for a second time round. So it's another year of podcast we're going to have to be doing. And I really need your help to make sure we can answer all your questions and get on the guests that you want. So drop me a line. It's robert@masonicpodcast.com. Hop onto the website, masonicpodcast.com. And also, I've now put a contact form on there as well. So if you just want to drop a quick question through the website, that's on the right-hand side. Scroll down a little bit on the right-hand side, pop your details in there, and that emails through to me. On to the main bit. It's a bit of a shorter one today. It's another interview with Chris Butlin. Chris Butlin is his fourth time on the podcast now. We started way back at the beginning, back in September, before he was even made a Mason. He's now gone through all his degrees, and I was the worshipful master for all of those as well, so that's great. And we're just catching up with him, see how that went, and see really what the future holds as well. So please welcome back to In the Chair, Chris Butlin. Please welcome back to In the Chair, Chris Butlin, who you've probably heard of quite a few times now. He was last on in episode 26 when he was talking about how he was made a Fellowcraft and was his upcoming third degree ceremony. So please welcome to In the Chair, Chris. So hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm well, Rob. Yourself?
Yeah, keeping well. With many thanks for coming back on. I think this is about your fourth time back onto In the Chair. So many thanks for coming on each time. And last time we spoke, which was on episode 26, we were talking about how you had been made a Fellowcraft. You had a few months of that going through, and also talk about Christmas and just settling into being a Freemason. But you had your upcoming ceremony, which was the third degree, what's known as the raising in the trade. And you've now gone through that. So you're now a Master Mason.
Indeed. Yeah, I am, with apron and all the good stuff that goes with it.
Congratulations. So how did you find that? I've got to ask. I mean, I know, and there's probably people listening to this who have gone through it themselves and know that there's a few surprises in store. So obviously we don't want to talk about anything of that, because I know quite a few people listen to this who are interested in joining Freemasonry. So we don't want to ruin any of those surprises. But how did you find the ceremony? Was it a surprise to you?
It was a surprise. It was it was very fitting with the experience. So as with the previous experiences, you really don't know what's happening.
No.
What's happening, but you have to kind of very bravely go with the flow, and it's a very positive experience as you go through it.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good way to put it. You don't know. I mean, that is surprising. You are deliberately sort of left in the dark for it, and it's those sort of surprises. You do just go with the flow, and it'd be quite easy to kind of go, hang on a minute, what's happening here? I'm not too sure on this, but actually, it kind of giving you that lesson to step into the uncertainty, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and I think you learn about the ceremonies afterwards. Really, I mean, that's my experience. Is as quickly as you can afterwards, get to see the ceremony again and understand it, because when you're going through it, you can't really take in the experience completely. And I think it's better to allow the experience, just to live the experience, than it is to try and control it or understand it.
Definitely, that's a really good way to put it, because it is just basically, I'd imagine although it's a very wordy one, it's very long. It's longer than the other two, but there's a lot to absorb. There's a lot of story to it as well. But I think it's something where you also you leave with a feeling. Even if you don't absorb any of the actual words, you still know the story behind it, I guess, and how that can apply to you as a Mason.
Yeah, and you actually travel through the story in the ceremony. So as you go through the stages of the ceremony, you go through the stages of the story that's being told in a very theatrical, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it's literally being acted out as you being the central character. I mean, you don't really realise it at the time. You're you're not really having to do that much. You're sort of sometimes, I'd say, I wouldn't say pushed about, but you're sort of moved into position. But
yeah, I'd say
it does happen around you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
It's an experience, I believe. I'm not too sure, and maybe some listeners will correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that in America what tends to happen is they might have a group ceremony where the actual candidates more tend to sit down and watch maybe past masters enact it, not going through it themselves. And I don't know if that's true for all lodges or just rather large lodges, but whenever I've heard that, I have thought that must be a bit of a shame, because to actually go through the experience and experience it without knowing what you're coming into, definitely, it must leave a much more stronger impression on you. It did for me. And I know, actually, when I've had guests on in the past and I've asked about the questions and, their memorable experiences, that often has been one that's come up, is the third degree ceremony as being one of the most memorable experiences they've taken out of Freemasonry. And I'm guessing you could probably understand why that might be.
Indeed, yeah. I wouldn't... I would say that it's a very moving ceremony. I think, it really, it touched me, and the experience was certainly worth going through and being part of, and it's all part of that learning journey that you go on when you start Masonry.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing, is what will happen is you've learned that sort of idea, and as you said, you'll visit other places, you'll witness it being done, and of course as you then actually start going through the offices, so don't worry, you're not going to have to be flying through them yet. This is one of those things that you'll be learning over the coming years, but as you start learning the words and those sort of things, and observing it being done, you will start picking out the subtleties in it as well. There's other little bits you probably won't have heard the first time round, probably not even the second, third, fourth or fifth time you actually hear it, but maybe when you're learning it, you might be a past master. For example, although I was the master doing quite a lot of the work, some of the work was also done by past masters who have been in Freemasonry now for 15 years, so they're only just starting to learn some of those longer pieces, some of them things known as the traditional history, the exaltation. Those parts are often done by sometimes more experienced Masons who have gone through it all, so it might not even really be until maybe 10, 15 years that you really get to grips with what you went through the other day as well.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think one of the things that I noticed as I went through the process is you're learning your responses to the questions you're asked. You're kind of learning about the previous ceremony. So yes. Because your responses are, in a sense, a reflection of the previous ceremony. Yeah, well, it's meant to sort of, that bit is exactly, it's testing you on the bits that you'd actually learnt. I mean, ironically, it doesn't really test you, it just tests, it's meant to represent being tested on there. And after you do those questions, there's always the question of, you can ask any other questions if anyone wishes to do so, and of course no one does, but it's always that option there, and it's just meant to demonstrate that, yes, you've learnt some lessons on there. And in reality, especially in England, it's more a case of you learn those answers to you know what the questions are going to be, you know what the answers are, so you learn those, and that is your proof that you've gone through it. But I remember actually a while back, where was it? I'll just have I think it was around about episode 20. It's episode 21. Had a chap on in the chair called Baris Erman from Turkey. And he actually said that there's a longer gap between going through the ceremonies, and they've actually got to do write an essay and a small test to prove that they have actually learnt some of the lessons in the degree before moving on to the next one. Yeah, as you go through the ceremonies, and there are different lessons, and
they're not ones that you can really, because they're more philosophical. It's not like you can apply them straight away anyway. I think they're more just build into your subconscious, I guess is probably the best way to put them. Would you agree? Yeah, is that something you would agree?
That's very true. You do build them into your subconscious. The promises you make and things slowly build up, and you build the understanding of them as you move forward.
Yeah,
kind of one layers on top of the other and become kind of deeper. So I think it's it's quite good approach to building, I guess the word solemnity into what you're doing.
Yes, yeah, because it's sort of an all-encompassing, and it still surprises me the layers on there that you can just go through it, pick up the basics, learn basically the basic bits is what you needed to do in order to prove yourself for the next degree, show that you've actually paid some attention, and that's fine. Or similarly, you can start going through the offices and learning those bits, and yes, you can learn it parrot fashion, but it always is a lot better, I find, if you can actually learn or get a bit of the meaning behind them. What will probably happen next year is, I mean, at the moment, we were saying earlier that you might potentially be going as inner guard next year. If you feel up for it, of course, you might just want to, that would be very quick, but is perfectly doable. Or it might be that you just have a year as a steward, just to sort of be helping in the lodge, just to kind of get your get a bit more used to what's happening in there. But what will probably happen regardless is you might still end up doing something like the working tools in the lodge one day. Not necessarily in all 3 degrees, but the working tools are a good way to start doing some bits in the lodge. And those are probably the direct lessons you can start taking from it as well. And actually looking at those, and sometimes those are bits that can wash over you quite easily when you're the candidate. But those are the bits where when you start learning how to do it, and you start learning the speech, so to speak, it is then very apparent the lessons that are in there, and that's actually quite a good little introductory. So I might recommend at some point, now you've got your little blue book, to have a flick through and read the working tools, because it wouldn't surprise me if you might be doing at least one of those at some point over the next 12 months.
Okay, forewarned is forearmed.
Forewarned, yes, exactly. So they're not massively long, apart from actually in Kennet Lodge. We do actually, for the second degree, do the, not all the time, but we do like to do it most of the times if we can. There's an extended version of the second degree working tools, which is quite a bit longer. I've done it myself, but it's one of those bits where it is a really nice piece, and to do the extended version. And whenever there's visitors to a lodge, whenever someone, especially a master mason, does the extended working tools, it really gives them a big tick next to their name, is probably the best way to put it. But don't feel like you've got to start learning those straight away. It's one of those things you can build up to, but I'm sure it will be one of those things that you'll probably be starting to do sooner rather than later. But it's a great way to also introduce you to doing basically floor work. I mean, at the moment, you've sort of been introduced to it by doing the answers to the questions. And then you can relax, basically, and let everyone else have the stress for the next hour. But by actually starting to get out and onto the floor and doing a bit more of the ritual, a bit more of the ceremony, I think you'll enjoy it. But I always think it's important to do something. I think it's quite easy sometimes nowadays for candidates, or not candidates, for younger Masons to say, I'll do that next year. And then, of course, the more you put it off, the bigger the jump seems to get between when you've got to get back on, and it starts becoming more of a mountain to climb the longer you put it off.
Yeah, I'm keen to be, I'm a great believer in, if you're doing anything, the best thing to do is to participate and be engaged. So, I think that's a very true... a very true thing to do, really. So I would definitely support that. It definitely.
Well, the thing is, it does seem daunting at first, because you've just gone through these ceremonies where, especially like in the third degree, you like with the traditional history and exaltations, you were literally stood there with one person for, I think, about a quarter of an hour. It was either about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, spoke to you as the only person. And I think he needed 2 prompts from the entire thing and had the rest committed to memory. And it's possible as a candidate to be thinking, crikey, how the heck do I learn this? But that guy spent 30 years learning that. And he's very good at it as well. So you don't need to panic. But sometimes it can seem daunting. And even just doing some of the simple things, like we were saying about potentially being in a guard, it can seem, when you start learning it, very confusing and a lot to learn. But then in hindsight, a few years down the line, you look back at it and go, well, that was only 3 lines. And to be honest, they're all pretty much the same in each ceremony, just with a few tweaks to adapt for each one.
Yep.
So I do think that's one of the reasons why it's a good idea to jump on in as soon as you can, because you might as well get on in at the deep end whilst you've got the momentum. And I think the enthusiasm as well. If you leave it, your enthusiasm can ebb off, and then it becomes a chore. And then you start panicking and worrying yourself. If you're doing it when you're brand new, if you make mistakes, no one really cares, because they're going to look at you and kind of go, well, he's only just joined, he's only been to a couple of meetings since he was, made a Master Mason. You can't expect him to be word perfect. And by then you've kind of, you've broken the back of it, so to speak. You're already in, you've already done a few bits. You can only get better from there. Yeah,
and you only get out what you put into life, and that will be true in Masonry, I'm sure, as well.
That's a very good philosophy, yes. I mean, if you literally just turn up to, and some people do, I think I've mentioned him on the podcast before about like someone like Adrian, who just turns up to the odd meeting now and again, happy to sell a few raffle tickets, enjoys the festive board, has a bit of a social. He's not going through any offices, he doesn't want to, and he knows that if he were to, he then wouldn't enjoy it, and if he didn't enjoy it, he then wouldn't come. So he'd much prefer just to come to the ones that he can do, where you do have other people who really do live for trying to make it as, they'll go through all the offices, go through all the different degrees and learn every single part that they can, because that's what they like to do. They want to be the person who's trying to take centre stage as much as they can. Maybe not so much for an ego sort of thing, but it's just because if they're going to do it, they want to do it well. And if they want to do it well, they want to let people see that they can do it well. So I guess there's that sort of, side of it as well to, Freemasonry. So you can sort of move at your speed, but as long as you're moving forward, I guess that's one of the main things.
Yeah, so, I think that sounds very true.
And of course, we're saying earlier is you'll in a couple of weeks' time, hopefully you'll be able to attend Lodge of Instruction as well for Kennet Lodge.
Indeed, yeah. So I'm planning to do my first one. I think it's in 2 weeks.
Yes, it's on. Yes, it's in it. Yeah, 2 weeks' time. Yeah, that's it. So I'm not too sure off the top of my head. I'm not too sure what ceremony we're going to be rehearsing. But to be honest, you probably won't actually have to do much that night. It's more going to be a familiarity side of things. And what will probably happen is the DC will say to you, "Okay, tonight we're going to be doing this. So and so's not turned up here. Can you sit in that chair and read out the parts for, well, maybe Inner Guard or maybe one of the other pieces." It might be, because it will be your first time, not even doing a particular office. It might just be that you will just play the candidate that evening. So although you've actually already been a candidate, and that it just gives you a familiarity to Lodge of Instruction.
Yeah.
And what it's about. And it's basically, it's like a lodge meeting, and some people, and I know some people don't have a Lodge of Instruction. Not all lodges actually have a Lodge of Instruction, and some, I don't know how it might be around the globe as well, but it's basically like a regular lodge meeting, but you just turn up wearing your jeans and that sort of thing. It's it's a sort of a casual night, and although it is actually technically a lodge meeting, we do open it, we do close it, we do all the words. Basically, if you need to read out the book, that's fine. It's basically for learning it, for taking the pressure off. And if you make mistakes and things, we can stop, we can go back. If there's things that you don't understand, you'll notice in that little blue book you've got, there's all the words that you've got to learn throughout the course as you learn the different parts. But there's also a lot of red writing as well. And I'm sure lots of people listening to this will be nodding and knowing what I'm saying here. And those are the bits that tell you where you've got to go and what you've got to do whilst you're doing it. Lots of, where you might place your feet whilst you're doing certain parts, those sort of things.
Yeah.
And those are sometimes the things that you don't really learn when you're sat at home, in the living room one evening reading the book. But those are the sort of things that you learn from Lodge of Instruction. The movements around the lodge, who's going where. So it's, it's a very good way to learn. And it's a great way, at any point you can, we can just sort of stop and go, actually, let's try that again, or you've missed a bit there or got that wrong. So it's really good, good for coming. It is, and it is fun as well, because it's not a regular lodge meeting. It's not so serious, and that means if people make mistakes or things, we can have a bit of a laugh, and no one needs to feel self-conscious. You don't need to feel nervous about it, and you can turn up, and hopefully, if once you start getting to a few more Lodge of Instructions, you might get told next month we're going to be doing this, and Chris, can you learn how to do that? You don't have to be word perfect on it, as long as you've shown sort of commitment that you're at least trying to go in the right direction. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
So don't panic. That's basically what I'm trying to say with that one. Don't feel as so if Gary, who's our DC at Lodge of Instruction, the preceptor there, if he suddenly gives you a piece, don't feel like you're going to have to be. I mean, if you could stand up there, knock it out the park, and get it word perfect, then trust me, no one's going to complain. That will be good, but don't feel like you've got to. But it's inevitable. You'll even in a small group of Lodge of Instruction might have 10 people there, 10 people sometimes. Sometimes it's even smaller in the summer months. You still get that nerves kick in because it's the thing you've been learning. It's the thing you want to do well.
Yeah.
So make sure you sort of pop along to that. But of course, you've also now, of course, got your Master Mason's apron. You've got your little book, and you will soon be getting your certificate from the Grand Lodge of England as well to confirm that you've been made a Master Mason. And have you got any plans to be going out visiting at all yet?
No detailed plans, although I've been talking to Robin about opportunities. So
yes, well, there's plenty around. I know when you had your initiation, actually, you was it a week later you went out to see someone else's, didn't you?
Yeah, we went to Wallingford.
That was it. Oh, of course, up to Wallingford to see. Yeah, up in West Berkshire. Where technically that's one of those places where it's actually in Oxfordshire county, but it's in Berkshire province. Yes. Yeah, one of the things I do find is once you become a Master Mason, it is quite good to start trying to get out and about. What I did find, though, is, of course, no one tends to invite you because you don't know anyone yet. So if there's any sort of social events that are coming up for Master Masons, do try and pop along to them and try and interact with people from other lodges who are in a similar boat with you, and try to invite one along to our lodge and then go and visit their lodge and those sort of things. You don't have to do it all the time, but it's quite nice to get out and about, and also try to go to different centres as well, because you'll notice that they do it differently in different places, and sometimes just little subtleties, but there's sometimes, like in Newbury, the way that they do the working tools is different to how they do it in Reading. It's only 10 miles down the road, but the way that they display them and everything is done differently.
A different approach.
So it's all sort of the same, but there's variations on the theme. And so going out and about, and sometimes you don't realise that you know things and you don't learn it until you're watching other people do it, and then you start spotting the differences. And then once you've got to the stage you start noticing those differences, then you realise that you must have been learning it in order to spot the difference. So
yeah,
that would sort of be my advice. Well, there's quite a few bits of advice. Get out. You want to be covering up masonry from all aspects. The social side of it, going out, meeting up with people, basically seeing the sights, going to different places, as well as actually learning the ritual itself, and it all start to come together. And then, of course, over the years, you can then hopefully sit back and enjoy it as you go through. And well, hopefully, as you say, it will either be steward or inner guard. Hopefully next year. So you are up for doing something, I take it.
Oh, yeah, definitely get involved. That's
yes.
What I say.
Brilliant, and I think that's the best bit of advice. If we end it there, I think the best bit of advice we can sort of give to anyone who's thinking of becoming a Freemason or going through those different degrees, is to do it and enjoy it and get involved in it. And I mean, it would be great to. I know we've sort of been having you on as actually the very first time was before you had even had your initiation ceremony. So that was before, then after you had that, then again after your fellowcraft, and now you've gone through. And it really has been, for you, the 2015-2016 season really has been a bit of a whirlwind for you, hasn't it?
It's gone quite quickly.
Yes,
I think
and it's actually been really great from my point of view, because of course I've been the master of the lodge during that period of time, and I've actually been the master who's conducted each one of your ceremonies. So from my point of view, I feel I've got a bit of a bond with you, because I've actually managed to put you through each of the ones. It's just the way it's fallen, the way that you've come in has meant I've managed to do those. So I'm quite pleased with that I've actually managed to do each one of your ceremonies as well. So that will be gives you something to. I'm hoping from the chat. I'm hoping you enjoyed sort of it from my point of view, and that for everyone in the lodge, that the work that's sort of gone into it as well, from to have the ceremony as well. So that's great. I'm going to let you get on, and what we'll hopefully do is maybe sometime a bit more in the future. Now we'll start getting to the Lodge of Instructions, and then maybe once the next meeting actually the next Kennet meeting isn't going to be until the installation meeting, which is going to be in September. So it might be that, I know it's quite a few months away now, we might try and catch up with you sometime maybe in the autumn again, just to see how things went over the summer, getting into the Lodge of Instruction, and see if you then actually do have an office, and start seeing, how you're progressing through those progressive offices, and generally, how you're finding Freemasonry after a few months off of relaxing in the sun.
Indeed. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, Chris, well, many thanks again. Enjoy your summer, and I'll speak to you again soon. So, of course, many thanks once again to Chris Butlin for coming back onto In the Chair and talking about his experiences. And, hopefully what we've learnt from him is how he's experienced and how he's enjoyed being a Freemason over the last, really, it was only about 7 months ago that he actually really joined Freemasonry back in September. He's gone through his offices, he's had Christmas parties, he's had all of those sort of things. And he's now, just in the last couple of weeks, been made a Master Mason. He's got his lovely new, shiny Master Mason. He looks really good in it. And, of course, it's we're now approaching our summer break. So hopefully back in the autumn, not only will he hopefully be taking an office in Kennet Lodge, but hopefully he's going to be getting out visiting and really trying to make the most of his Freemasonry. So, well done to Chris. I do think, let's just sort of say publicly, well done to Chris for that. And for his time of coming onto In the Chair and talking about it. It really is appreciated. I know lots of people do actually ask me about how he's getting on, and it is appreciated. Remember, if you have any questions for a future Q&A episode, let me know. It's robert@masonicpodcast.com or Masonic Podcast on Twitter. Any thoughts and ideas are greatly appreciated. This has been show number 29. You can find the details at masonicpodcast.com/29. Hope you've enjoyed it. I've got some more excellent episodes lined up. Hopefully you're going to get on next week, and hopefully my voice is going to hold out. Sorry about going on so long at the beginning, but I'll speak to you again soon. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you for listening to In the Chair. Visit masonicpodcast.com to see the show notes and in-the-chair.co.uk for more resources to help you get the most out of your Masonic journey. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know by rating and reviewing it on iTunes. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss our next podcast. If you're not already, follow us on Twitter @Masonic Podcast.